All right, so as we're getting ready to take some notes, guys, just some friendly tips to you if you're struggling with logic homework. So step number one would be this: slow down. Okay, slow down. You can do it at home. You can do it before school. You can come and see me before or during lunch scolaire or after school. So slow down and take your time. The second thing that I would tell you is this: do your homework with your notes and your textbook in front of you. If the question is asking you about defining by example and you're kind of confused, open up your textbook to the section where it talks about defining by example. Read that section, read your notes, and then try and answer it. Okay, so if we're trying to do homework with our notes and our textbook closed, you're kind of trying to do your homework with your hands tied behind your back. Use the resources you have, and that's going to help you. Yes?
So if they come to you like before school or during school or after school, are you going to tell us to figure out, or are you?
It's going to depend on if it's the first time you've done something or if it's the second time you've done something. Because oftentimes people come to me not because they don't know how to do the thing, but because they haven't found the answer yet and they're tired of thinking about it. So they come to me and say, is this the right answer? Or tell me the right answer. And that I won't help you with. But if it's something that, like, for example, tonight, you'll be asked to identify rules that definitions break, and you've never done that. So if you've genuinely tried and you really are stuck and you want to come to me, then yeah, that's something I can help you with. But I think you won't be stuck if you'll follow my process. Yes. Well, then I can. What I'll do is I won't answer your question about your homework. I'll take you back to how to do something, but I'm not going to tell you. Here's how you. Again, that's for the first time. One of the things you're going to have to learn, not just for logic but for life, is what to do when you're confused. Okay, my lectures come straight out of the textbook. The textbook is better than I am at explaining things. So I think if you'll reread the textbook and you'll reread your notes, I bet that you'll know how to do it. But oftentimes, I'm not saying you, I'm saying oftentimes people don't want to put in that work. They don't want to put in the work of reading the section. They don't want to put in the work of reading their notes. They want the teacher to do their thinking for them, and that just cripples you. I saw the saddest thing on Friday. I came into this class, and there was a class in here. I won't tell you what grade. It wasn't you, obviously. And there was a line of kids at the desk waiting to ask their teacher, basically to tell them if the answer they wrote on the test was right or not. Because, and I thought, that's awful. You've got to learn how to think for yourself. Like, you've got to learn, okay, what do I do when I'm confused? Okay, I go to my textbook, I go to my notes, and then I think and use the brain God gave me and figure stuff out. That really, more than logic, is really what I want you to learn. How to think for yourself and know what to do when I'm confused. Here's what I do to get unconfused. Okay, so that's what we're driving at. But let's get into rules for defining by genus and difference. All right. Rule number one: a definition should state the essential attributes of the term. And it's in your catechism, but what does essential attribute mean? What's the one word definition? Essential means, you just said it, necessary. Yes, so necessary. In other words, it's something that the term wouldn't be what it is without them. Essential attributes are things that if you took this word out of the definition, you have removed the essential attributes of the term, okay? And we'll talk about what that means on this next slide. So essential means the term wouldn't be what it is without them. So, for example, let's think of the term car. And if I asked you to define the term car, you would probably think of something like a vehicle that can take me places. Again, not a perfect definition, but that's a pretty good definition. A vehicle that can take me places. But an accidental attribute of a car is that it's white. So, for example, my car is a 2017 Toyota Corolla, and it's white. If I was defining my car, is white an essential part of what makes my car a car? No. If my car was blue, it would still be a car. If it was gray, it would still be a car. If it was rusted and was like 15 different colors, it would still be a car. So the question we're asking is this: would changing this attribute destroy the meaning of the term? Like, if I was defining car and I changed my white car to a blue car, it would still be a car. But if I took away the fact that it's a vehicle that can take me places, that's not a car anymore. That's just a piece of metal. Okay? So we're asking the question, would changing this destroy the meaning of the term? And if it would, if changing this attribute would change the term itself, well, that's no longer a car, or that's no longer a building, or that's no longer a fill in the blank. then that's an essential attribute, and that should be in your definition. So the reason we do this is it tells us what's essential, it tells us what's relevant, and it avoids being redundant. So rule number one that I want you to get, state the essential attributes and ask yourself that question. If I change this, would that change the term itself? All right, rule number two. So what's wrong with these definitions? Circus performer, someone who performs at circuses. Blindness, the state of being blind. Vale?
The first one, it just tells you that the circus performer performs at the circus, and that's already kind of communicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do we call that? Sellers?
I'm just going to say it uses the word.
Yeah, it uses the word in the definition, and we call that circular. It's a circular definition. And the problem, like Vale identified, is like definitions like this don't teach us anything new. If I don't know what a circus performer is, and you says someone who performs at circuses, guess what? I still don't know what a circus performer is. If I say what's blindness, and you say the state of being blind, I still don't know what blindness is. The problem with circular definitions is they don't teach us anything new. So rule number two, a definition should not be circular. Rule number two is a definition should not be circular. Now, sometimes it is okay to use a part of a word that you're defining in the definition. And your textbook will kind of explore some of those situations. But almost always, you don't want to do this. Okay, so rule number one, essential attributes only. Rule number two, definition should not be circular. Any questions about rule number one or rule number two? All right, rule number three. Okay, what's wrong with these definitions, or specifically this first one? Cereal, a food that you eat with a spoon. Jackson?
You eat many other things besides just cereal?
Yes, soup, for example, or ice cream, for example. So that definition is too broad, okay? Well, what if I define school? What if you said, hey, Mr. Wood, what's a school? And I said, a school is a building on County Road 14 across the street from Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church. Now, is that true for Westminster? Is this a school?
Yes.
Are we on County Road 14? Are we across the street from Oak Mountain Presbyterian? Yeah, sure thing. But I've just eliminated every other school in existence. So that definition is too narrow. So definition should not be too broad, and definition should not be too narrow. That's rule number three. A definition should not be too broad, like cereal, a food that you eat with a spoon, or too narrow, like school, a building on County Road 14 across the street from Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church. That is too narrow. Now, a definition that's too broad includes more than you mean. So the problem with defining cereal this way is I'm including soup and ice cream and probably several other things I'm not thinking of in there, and I don't want to include that in my definition for cereal. I just want cereal. And a definition that's too narrow includes less than I mean. If I'm defining school as a building on County Road 14 across from Oak Mountain Presbyterian, I've ruled out, for example, Bonnie Kate Elementary, where I went to elementary. Go Wildcats. I'm ruling out South Doyle Middle and High School, where I went to school. Go Cherokees. Go Cherokees, right? So we're ruling out too much. So rule number one, essential attributes only. Rule number two, don't be circular. Rule number three, not too broad, not too narrow. Any questions so far? All right. Rule number four, a definition should not be unclear or figurative. Okay, now there are three ways that a definition can be unclear. Ambiguous words, vague words, obscure words. Okay, so an ambiguous word. If you said logic class, a very cool class. Cool could mean fun, cool could mean temperature. That's an ambiguous word, so that's not a good definition. If you said logic class, a very long class. Long in what way? Long emotionally, long mentally? Is it 6 hours long literally? What does that mean? That's a vague word, so that's not a good definition. An obscure word. If you said logic class, a mentally stimulating exercise of the logical acumen. Well, exactly. Huh? That's a word that really no one uses, and so that's not a good definition either. So we want to avoid ambiguous words, vague words, and obscure words. And just please note, those are three different things. Ambiguous, vague, and obscure are three different things. Okay, but what about figurative? Well, definitions are unclear if you use metaphors in them. So if I define dog as a man's best friend, that's a metaphor. And that's not a very helpful definition. So I'll give you a little kind of hint on your homework tonight. It's going to say wife, Adam's rib. Now, is that a literal thing? Is every wife literally a piece of bone from Adam's side? No. That's using a metaphor to define wife, and that's not a good definition. So rule number 1, essential attributes only. Rule number 2, no circular definitions. Rule number 3, not too broad, not too narrow. Rule number 4, don't be unclear or figurative. Okay, any questions about the first 4 rules? All right, rule number 5, a definition should be stated positively if possible. Okay, now it's easier, let's just be honest, it's easier to say what something is not rather than what it is, but we need to work to find a positive definition. So if I asked Weaver, hey Weaver, what is the ocean? It would be easy to say the part of the planet that's not land. Well, that's true, but that's not a very good definition. Weaver needs to think about, okay, well, what is the ocean? Right? That's something he needs to think about and give a positively stated definition. Now, as I kind of hinted at, some terms like bald or unhappy or poor are negative concepts, and they actually require a negative definition. If you wanted to define baldness, you would find it hard pressed, or you would find it very difficult to define baldness without using words like not or without or less, right? Like you're going to have to use a negative concept, and that's okay. But I'll tell you, in your textbook, your homework, your quizzes, and on your tests, almost every definition should be positive. There will be a couple, and it'll be very obvious which ones they are. So almost all your definitions will be positive, but every once in a while you might have to use one, okay? Rules 1 through 5. Any questions? Essential, circular, not too broad, not too narrow, not unclear or metaphorical, stated positively. Any questions so far? You about to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why should definitions be like?
Well, so let's imagine just for a second. Somebody said, okay, Mr. Wood, define student. And I said, someone who isn't the President of the United States. Okay, well, that's true. You're not the President of the United States. But that doesn't in any way narrow it down. You've just eliminated one thing. You've not told me what a student is. And so the problem with negative definitions like ocean, the part of the planet that is not land, okay, true, but that still leaves a lot of ground uncovered, right? That still leaves I still don't know what an ocean is. So definitions should be communicating what something is, not what something is not, okay? Yeah, that's what we're going for. If I'm asking you, what is the ocean? It's because I don't know. Your definition should leave me knowing what the ocean is or knowing what a student is, okay? Jackson, were you going to claim to be the president? Okay. All right. 1 through 5, any other questions? All right, last rule, rule number 6. A definition should be of the same part of speech as the term. So if I ask you for the definition of to eat, and you said what you do with food, well, that's true, but it's not an acceptable definition. Because I gave you a verb, to eat, and you gave back to me a noun phrase. So that we've got to match these together. So verbs define verbs, nouns define nouns, adjectives define adjectives. If I say define large, what part of speech is large? Adjective. So you got to define it by an adjective. If I say to eat, that's a verb. It needs to be an infinitive verb, to blank, to do something. And if I give you a noun, right? School, you've got to define using a noun, right? So obviously your definition will include perhaps all of them, but it needs to be a noun, right? We're leading with a noun or an adjective or a verb. Yes?
So if it was to eat, would it have to be in infinitive form?
Yes.
Or could it be a different, like?
It would have to be the infinitive form.
Okay.
Okay. So, for example, to eat, okay, what would be a good verb that would give me a good definition of to eat? Yeah, to consume food, right? To consume food. And so what would that's a genus and species, right? So to consume, okay, but I'm not liquid. I'm not consuming liquid when I eat. I'm consuming food, right? To consume food would be a good definition of to eat. Now, obviously, food, gentlemen, food is a noun. So I'm not saying that your definition for verbs can't have nouns in them. I'm saying that that is a verb, right? To consume food. The weight is on the verb versus the weight being on the noun, okay? Any other questions about rule number 6? Okay, just a little hint for you when you're doing your homework tonight. If the definition has where and when, it's usually saying that there's a problem with this definition. It's breaking rule number 6. So if it has where or when, it's likely breaking rule number 6. So let me go over your homework tonight. Exercise 5 for 54 points. So 1 through 12, this is the instructions. Identify the rules broken by circling the correct number or numbers. Use the numbers in the following list. And then they list for you, numbering 1 through 6, the 6 rules for defining by genus and difference. So what you're going to do is you're going to read each one of these definitions and you're going to ask yourself one at a time, okay, does this definition break rule number 1? Does this definition break rule number 2? Does this definition break rule number 3? Now, your teacher has graciously and kindly, out of the kindness of my own heart and my undying love for you, I have put on the board how many rules each one of these definitions break. You are going to write that in the margin over here, and you're going to know, okay, so number 1 only breaks 1 rule. So that means you're going to start at the first rule, and you're going to ask, and then as soon as you find a rule that it breaks, guess what you do? Go on to the next one, because you know that it only breaks 1. So let's do number 1 together. Mountain, a natural object bigger than a hill. Okay, does this break rule number 1? Does that state the essential attributes of the term? I would say yes, it does. So that rule number 1, we're good. All right, number 2, not be circular. Does it use the word mountain in the definition? No? Okay, so we're good on rule number 2. Rule number 3, not be too broad or too narrow.
Yeah, too broad.
It's too
Yes,
narrow.
that's too, which one is it?
Narrow, because it
Broad,
says it's bigger than
broad.
It's too broad. That includes too much. Okay? A natural object bigger than a hill, that could include, well, how big is the hill? So it's also kind of vague. But what we're really saying is that is too broad. That includes too many things that I don't want to include in there. So for number 1, you're going to circle number 3, and you're going to go on to the next one. Okay? So when I give you this, the first thing I want you to do besides put your name on it is write these numbers down on this page, and you'll know how many rules they break. Any questions about how to do numbers 1 through 12?
So you just mark it?
You circle it. So for number 1, you would circle number 3 right here.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
there's
circle it.
Okay. Now, for numbers 13 through 18, it's just genus and species charts. Okay? So I've done the first one for you. So it says dinner, and it wants you to come up with the genus of dinner, a species on the same line as dinner, and then a species of dinner. Okay, so here's the first one for you. Meal is the genus of dinner. Another species would be lunch, and then a species of dinner would be a wedding banquet. Okay, now, here's the catch. Here's what you got to do differently about this one. So 13 through 18, you're doing genus and species charts, right? We know how to do this. 19 through 24 gives you those same words. So it says, define the following terms by genus and difference using the same genus from the chart above. So for example, so it wants you for number 19 to define dinner. Okay, based on the genus and species chart, what did I say the genus of dinner is? Meal. Okay, and now I'm going to give the difference between dinner and lunch. What's the difference between dinner and lunch? Yeah, that's one that you eat at night. And so what I would write for number 19 is dinner, a meal that you eat at night. Okay? So for 13 through 18, you're going to do the genus and species chart. And then for 19 through 24, you're going to use those same charts to come up with a genus and difference definition. Okay? Any questions about how to do that? So, like Anna asked, you're more than welcome to come see me after school or during your school day today. You're more than welcome to come see me before school tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you the answers, but I will. If you are confused about a rule or if you're confused about what to do, I'm happy to help you out on this assignment, okay? So are there any questions about how to do anything that I'm asking you to do? So again, the very first thing I want you to do is put your name on, and then I want you to write in the margin these numbers, right? Number 1 breaks 1, number 2 breaks 2, number 3 breaks 1, so on and so forth. So we got about 5 minutes before the fictional bell rings, so you can go ahead and start working on this.
Can I ask you something about the schedule?
Yes, you can.
Do we still have school?
Yeah, you get your full 7 periods. There it is. Right there.
Oh, okay, it's just 30 minutes though.
Yeah, everything's 30 minutes this
Okay.
week, Monday through Thursday anyway.
And it's at the end. Do you know?
Oh, it's at the end.
No, it's not. It's. Oh, never mind.